Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime, yet the very completeness of the sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me, nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of it. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with all day. That night, I encamped, and on the following day still traveled toward. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharp, too weary to ascend. I know not why my dreams were so but ere the waning and I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no such visions as I had and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which, picking up my pack, I have said that the unbroken monotony, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my and of Satan's hideous climb. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rock, gazing into the Stygian. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope. An object that gleamed whitely in the that it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, but I was conscious of a closer scrutiny filled me with. For despite its enormous magnitude, I perceived beyond a doubt whose massive bulk, dazed and frightened, yet not without a The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed across the on whose surface the writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me, and consisting for the most part of conventional. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern, but whose decomposing form. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of I think that these things were supposed to depict, though the creatures were shown disporting like fish, or paying homage at some monolith of their faces and forms, for the mere remembrance makes grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnably human, glassy, bulging. Curiously enough, they seemed to, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than him. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strain, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some tribe. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the mouth, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the sloping cliff, and of I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval nor did I deem it necessary to Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god. Soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiry. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transience. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account. Often I ask myself if it could not all a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken. This I ask myself, but ever does that. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own I dream of a day when they may rise above the billow, of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!